On the Giza Plateau, just outside Cairo, three massive pyramids have stood for more than 4,500 years. The largest of them contains roughly 2.5 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as 80 tons. For decades, one question has refused to go away. How did people without modern machinery actually build these structures? The answer, when you look at the evidence carefully, is far more interesting than most viral videos suggest. What the pyramids actually are. Before getting into how they were built, it is worth being clear about what we are talking about. The Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed during the reign of the pharaoh Khufu, around 2560 BC. It originally stood about 146 meters tall, making it the tallest human-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. Its base covers more than 5 hectares and is almost perfectly square. The two smaller pyramids on the plateau were built by Khufu's son Khafre and his grandson Menkaure during the same dynasty. These are not the only pyramids in Egypt. There are more than 100 surviving pyramids spread across the country, built across roughly 1,000 years of history. The earliest, the Step Pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, dates to around 2670 BC. The pyramids at Giza represent the peak of pyramid construction, but they are part of a long architectural tradition that developed gradually over many generations. That tradition is one of the keys to understanding how the pyramids were actually built. The Great Pyramid did not appear out of nowhere. It is the result of centuries of accumulated experience. The Step Pyramid was essentially a stack of progressively smaller mastabas, the rectangular tomb structures that had been used in Egypt for centuries before. Over the next 100 years, builders experimented. The bent pyramid at Dashur shows where engineers had to change the angle of the slope partway up because the original design was unstable. The Red Pyramid, also at Dashur, was the first true smooth-sided pyramid, and it served as the immediate predecessor to the Great Pyramid. By the time Khufu's architects began work at Giza, they had inherited generations of trial, error, and refinement. This is rarely mentioned in viral content, but it is one of the most important parts of the story.
That isn't working is rusted because they don't have enough power to keep it going. As if they couldn't provide power for the seventh wonder of the world and this additional supplement to it that's in this museum. Now, that boat...
Why the story exploded online. Search the topic of pyramid construction online, and you will find no shortage of dramatic claims. Some videos suggest the pyramids were built by an advanced lost civilization. Others claim they were constructed using technology beyond what ancient Egyptians could have possessed. There are theories involving alien visitors, sound levitation, hidden energy sources, and the idea that the stones were poured rather than carved. These ideas spread for understandable reasons. The pyramids are genuinely massive, the blocks are heavy, the geometry is precise, and the construction happened thousands of years before the invention of cranes, trucks, or modern surveying equipment. For someone seeing the Great Pyramid for the first time, it is natural to wonder how it could possibly have been built by hand. The implication in much of this content is that mainstream archaeology cannot explain the pyramids, that experts are uncertain, or that important evidence is being ignored or hidden. It is important to be direct about this. That framing is not accurate. Egyptologists and engineers have spent more than a century studying how the pyramids were built, and the evidence they have gathered tells a remarkably clear story.
Here, the Step Pyramid attributed alternately to Djoser and Sneferu. Near Memphis, this is the land of Goshen, this area in here, which is where the brothers of Joseph were clustered, the best part of Egypt.
Who actually built the pyramids? For most of the 20th century, popular culture often portrayed the pyramids as having been built by enslaved laborers under brutal conditions. This image, while dramatic, is not what the archaeological record shows. In 1990, archaeologists working near the Great Pyramid uncovered a large workers' settlement, now known as the Lost City of the Pyramid Builders. Excavations led by Egyptologist Mark Lanner and his team revealed bakeries, breweries, dormitories, and a cemetery for workers who had died during construction. The remains showed signs of injuries that had been treated medically, including healed bone fractures. Some skeletons even showed evidence of complex surgeries, including amputations that the patient had clearly survived for years afterward. Animal bones recovered from the site indicate that the workers ate substantial amounts of beef, fish, and bread, with one estimate suggesting that enough cattle were processed at the site to feed thousands of people daily. The workers were buried with grave goods and inscriptions, something that would not have been done for enslaved people. Inscriptions on the tombs identified them as members of work crews with names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure. These were organized teams who took pride in their work. The crew names appear painted on stone blocks deep inside the pyramids themselves, marks left behind by the gangs who placed each section. Estimates of how many people worked on the Great Pyramid have been revised dramatically over the years. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing more than 2,000 years after the fact, claimed 100,000 laborers were involved. Modern archaeological evidence suggests the actual number was far smaller, somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 people working in rotating shifts. Many were skilled tradesmen, while others were seasonal laborers from farming communities who worked on the project during the months when the Nile was flooded and agriculture was impossible. Where the stones came from. One of the most common claims in viral content is that the stones used in the pyramids could not have come from local sources. This is incorrect. The geology of the Giza Plateau itself answers most of the question. The vast majority of the stone blocks in the Great Pyramid are limestone, and they were quarried directly from the plateau on which the pyramid stands. Archaeologists have identified the quarry, located just a few hundred meters south of the pyramid. Tool marks, partially extracted blocks, and discarded fragments are still visible there today. The finer white limestone that originally covered the outside of the pyramid as a smooth casing was quarried at Tura, on the opposite side of the Nile, about 13 kilometers away. The granite used in the king's chamber and other interior structures came from Aswan, roughly 800 kilometers to the south. Moving such heavy materials across long distances is one of the genuinely impressive parts of the pyramid story, and the evidence for how it was done is extensive.
They would have us believe that these were built as gigantic funeral deposits for these 4th and 5th dynasty, and the later, those are the oldest pyramids, and the later pyramids as tombs or deposits for the bodies of the pharaohs of the later dynasties, the 5th and 6th. And starting about 2600 BC.
How the stones were transported. In 2013, archaeologists discovered a remarkable set of documents at a site called Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast. They were papyrus scrolls written by an inspector named Merer, who oversaw a team of about 200 workers during the final years of Khufu's reign. The scrolls, now known as the Diary of Merer, are the oldest written documents ever found in Egypt. They describe in detail how Merer's team transported limestone blocks from the Tura quarries to the Great Pyramid construction site by boat. The diary describes the journey down the Nile, the movement of stones along man-made canals, and the daily logistics of feeding and managing the workers. It even names specific officials who oversaw the project, including Khufu's half-brother Ankaf, who is identified in the documents as the supervisor of the Great Pyramid's construction. This single discovery transformed our understanding of pyramid construction. It confirmed that the Egyptians moved heavy stones using the Nile and a network of canals, and that they kept careful written records of the entire operation. The scrolls also revealed that Merer's crew made the round trip from the quarry to the construction site multiple times a month, suggesting the operation was running at industrial scale and on a tight schedule. For overland movement, archaeologists have also gathered direct evidence. A wall painting in the tomb of a nobleman named Jehutehotep, dating to around 1900 BC, shows a giant statue being dragged across the desert on a wooden sledge. In the painting, a man at the front of the sledge is pouring water onto the sand in front of the runners. For a long time, this detail was assumed to be ceremonial, but in 2014, Physicists at the University of Amsterdam tested the idea experimentally. They demonstrated that wetting desert sand with the right amount of water roughly cuts in half the force needed to drag a heavy load across it. The water binds the sand grains together, creating a firmer surface that prevents the sledge from digging in. The painting, in other words, was not symbolic. It was an instruction. This kind of finding is part of why archaeologists are confident in their understanding of pyramid construction. Multiple independent lines of evidence, ancient art, written records, modern physics, all point in the same direction. If you are finding this kind of careful look at what evidence actually shows useful, take a moment to subscribe before we continue. The next part of the story is where most of the genuine engineering puzzles live, and the answers are more grounded than most viral videos let on. How the blocks were lifted into place. The single biggest question in pyramid construction has always been the same. How did workers lift heavy stone blocks more than 100 meters into the air without modern cranes? The leading explanation, and the one supported by physical evidence, involves ramps. The Egyptians had already used ramp systems on earlier pyramids, and traces of these ramps have been found at multiple construction sites. The exact design of the ramps used at Giza has been debated for decades, and several different versions have been proposed. One theory is that a long straight ramp extended outward from the pyramid, growing longer as the pyramid grew taller. Another is that ramps wrapped around the outside of the pyramid in a spiral. A third proposal, put forward by French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, suggests that an internal spiral ramp was built inside the pyramid as construction progressed. Each of these theories has supporters and critics among engineers and Egyptologists. None has been definitively proven. What is established, however, is that some form of ramp system was used. The evidence is direct. In 2018, a French and British team excavating at the alabaster quarry of Hatnub in the Egyptian desert uncovered a remarkable find. They discovered a steep ramp dating to the reign of Khufu, flanked on both sides by staircases and post holes. The post holes had clearly held wooden beams. The arrangement allowed workers to use ropes and the wooden posts as a pulley system to drag heavy blocks up the ramp at angles much steeper than had been thought possible. This was direct, dated, physical evidence of a hauling system used during the very period the Great Pyramid was being built. It is the kind of discovery that does not make for a viral video, but it answers the central engineering question with hard evidence. The precision of the construction. Another claim that often appears online is that the pyramids are too precise to have been built by hand. The base of the Great Pyramid is very nearly a perfect square, and its sides are aligned closely to the four cardinal directions. How could ancient people have achieved this without modern instruments? The answer comes from understanding what tools they actually had. Egyptian surveyors used long ropes with knots tied at regular intervals as standardized measuring devices. They used wooden A-frames with plumb lines to ensure level surfaces and right angles, and for cardinal alignment, they used the stars. Astronomer Kate Spence proposed in 2000 that the Egyptians could have aligned the pyramid by sighting on a pair of stars that, at the time of Khufu, would have appeared on either side of the celestial pole. By aligning a structure with the moment when those stars formed a vertical line, surveyors could determine true north with remarkable accuracy. This method does not require any technology more advanced than a plumb line and patience. The precision of the pyramid is genuinely impressive. The base is level to within a few centimeters across more than 200 meters of length. The four sides are aligned to true north, south, east, and west to within a fraction of a degree. But this kind of precision is achievable with simple tools used carefully by experienced craftsmen over a long period. It is the result of skill, not technology beyond the ancient world. Modern surveyors who have replicated Egyptian methods using only ropes, plumb lines, and stellar observations have achieved comparable results. What the evidence does not support it is worth being direct about the more dramatic theories. There is no credible evidence that the pyramids were built by an advanced, lost civilization. Every aspect of their construction, the quarrying, the transport, the assembly, the alignment, can be traced through the archaeological record of ancient Egypt itself. There is no evidence that the pyramids were built by extraterrestrials, no artifacts, no materials, and no written or visual records from the ancient world support this claim. The argument depends entirely on the assumption that ancient Egyptians could not have built the pyramids themselves, and that assumption is contradicted by everything we know about their culture and capabilities. The theory that the blocks were poured rather than carved, sometimes attributed to French chemist Joseph Davidovits, has been examined by mainstream geologists and Egyptologists. Detailed studies of the actual stone blocks show fossils, sedimentary layering, and other features consistent with natural limestone, not artificial concrete. The theory has not been accepted by the scientific community. In every case, the alternative explanations require ignoring or dismissing physical evidence that already points clearly toward conventional construction methods. What remains genuinely unknown? This is where some real nuance is worth adding. Although the broad picture of how the pyramids were built is well established, several specific questions are still actively researched. The exact design of the ramp system used at the Great Pyramid has not been settled. Different teams favor different reconstructions, and the truth may involve a combination of methods. The internal structure of the Great Pyramid is also not fully mapped. In 2017, a team using cosmic ray imaging discovered a previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, roughly 30 meters long. Its purpose is still under investigation. Earlier this decade, the same imaging technique revealed a smaller corridor near the north face of the pyramid, also previously unknown. These are not signs that the pyramid is mysterious in some supernatural sense. They are reminders that even a well-studied monument still holds details that careful research can uncover. The exact organization of the labor force, how teams were rotated, how supplies were managed, and how decisions were made on site is still being pieced together from documents like the Diary of Merer. Each new discovery fills in another part of the picture, what the evidence actually supports. When you set aside the more sensational claims and look at what the evidence shows, the picture becomes remarkably clear. The pyramids were built by ancient Egyptians, drawing on centuries of accumulated experience in stoneworking, surveying, and large-scale organization. The workers were paid laborers and skilled craftsmen, not enslaved people. They lived in organized settlements with food, medical care, and social structure. The stones were quarried locally for the bulk of the construction and brought from more distant sites for the finer materials. They were transported using boats, canals, and wooden sledges hauled across wetted sand. They were lifted into place using ramp systems combined with rope and wooden post-pulley arrangements. The geometric precision of the structures was achieved through simple but carefully used surveying tools and stellar alignment. What remains uncertain is in the details. The exact ramp design, the full layout of internal chambers, and the fine logistical structure of the workforce are all still being refined as new archaeological work is carried out. What is not supported by evidence is the claim that the pyramids required technology beyond what the ancient Egyptians possessed, or that they were built by anyone other than the people whose civilization produced them. Conclusion: the pyramids are sometimes presented as one of the great unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. There is a kernel of truth to that. We do not yet have a complete blueprint for the Great Pyramid. Some specific engineering questions are still being worked out, but the larger picture is not mysterious. It is one of the better documented construction achievements of antiquity. The Egyptians built the pyramids using stone, rope, wood, water, manpower, and time. They organized tens of thousands of people across decades of work. They used the geography of the Nile, the geology of the desert, and their understanding of the stars to accomplish something that still impresses engineers 4,500 years later. The real story is not that the pyramids were built by some unknown power. It is that human beings, working together, with simple tools and remarkable patience, built them themselves. If this kind of clear, evidence-based investigation is the kind of content you would like to see more of on this channel, consider subscribing. New videos exploring the truth behind well-known stories are released every week. Now we are curious to hear from you. Do you think the pyramids are easier to appreciate when you understand how they were actually built? Or does some of the mystery get lost in the explanation? Share your thoughts in the comments below.